And then can you walk us through what you're doing and what you're showing?
Yep. Right now, I just opened an old project and created a new workspace. It's my new habit, so I don't have like a million test projects I'm trying to reuse. But I'm just gonna do like some basic stuff. I'm gonna set up 2 data collections first, or actually maybe I even have some stuff in here. I'll just set up 2 new ones. And then I'm just gonna merge them into one grid, like simple, like I don't know if it's gonna like actually help in the situation we're talking about. Like probably won't solve it. I think there's a bug in that situation, but this is just like the concept of merging data, which is pretty cool. Actually, I don't know. It'll get a little more complex now that I'm thinking it through to like display the data, but I can show this first part because it's like a universal concept. So let's say we have, I'm just going to do like name and description type, like just a generic type fields, and then add a few records. That's weird. You get the idea. Weird one I'm just going to delete, and then I'll create a second data collection. For this demo, I'm going to use the same field names because I'm just going to, but like in real life, depending on the situation, it might not be this straightforward. Like you probably have different fields and different tables and stuff, but maybe not. I'll just call these B.
Hey, buddy.
That. So if I have a grid, let me just build a page for this so we can see them. It's usually about the extent of how I build out pages when I just want to see it. Just put something on there. Name. Okay. So now this grid will display this page, the amount of times, you know, for the record. And to do it for one set, you come to the data tab and you go to the collection list and you can say from data 1, get all fields. And then when I preview this, it'll show, I think there was 3 records in that field, so it'll show 3 records. But what I want to do instead with this merge, instead of using this data tab at all, because I can't merge through here, right, Dorian? I don't think so.
No.
So instead of using this at all, or you could even have it set originally, it was, you know, I would just overwrite it. I could have kept that, but I just won't use that. And on page binding or page load, you can just add a set value, and that's where you do the merge. So if I do element set value, I'm going to set a value into this grid. And I'm going to say, so to take a step back, to redo what I just did in the data tab, I would come from a data collection and I'll just select that data 1 and select all fields. Very similar, but this is a way I'll do that. This is actually literally the same thing in most ways as that data binding tab. It's just the data binding tab is automatic. So really this is like achieving the same thing. I'm setting this data collection, all fields into, well,
Yeah. And one thing, it wouldn't be on the element argument, it would be on the
oh,
value.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It shows the, whoops. First, I'd have to choose the grid.
Yeah.
And I'd have to choose data collection for the value. So that's how you do that one. So now if I want to do 2, I can merge them in. So instead of doing a data collection input type, there's a merge input type right here. And if I do merge, it's expecting 2 arrays technically, but what that means in like Bildr terms is expecting 2 collections, like 2 data sets, because a collection is just an array behind the scenes. And so we've got a merge key, which is what it's going to actually use to like merge them. And we've got data array 1 here. And then if I want 2, I'd add another, that kind of thing. So what I'll do is I'll come to data array 1, I'll take from a data collection of data 1, get all fields. And then data array 2, I'll also come from a data collection, but I'll come from data 2 and take all fields. And since I know that both of these have IDs and I want each record to be unique, basically, like I want to show a record for everything. I don't actually want to combine any of these records. So for this merge key, I can use ID. because ID is unique for all these records, and it won't merge any together because they'll all have unique IDs. So I do ID, those two data sets, and then I could do a sort. I don't need to right now, but if you wanted to sort that data, you can choose a field, or if it's an array, you can choose a key to sort by. But that's all I need to do. So now if I preview this, which I got to set up a URL route, instead of having 3, because it's just data collection 1, it'll have 6 records because it'll be both. We'll just call this merge. Or it'll just have 0, I guess. I guess 0 happened. Nope, forgot to select the element. Or maybe, didn't I select that element?
Yeah, I think you did.
Maybe that's not what's going on. Just gonna see if it makes the calls here. That's strange. I don't have to add a sort field, right?
No,
It's pretty weird because I don't even see the network calls coming out. That's why, oh, here it might be one. No.
no, it's resonance.
Yeah, it's like not even making those network calls.
It's going to the right page, merge demo. Yeah,
Should be, I don't think there's anything else.
and that page does have the page load bound to it. If you go to,
So I just added this page, you know. Yeah, how to get to all
yeah,
this
it's
stuff.
there, page load.
Hmm.
We can do a breakpoint on that action and see.
Just break on any, just do a general breakpoint and see what runs when it goes, you know?
Oh, well, look who decided to come on in.
Oh, oops.
Sorry.
I can go right to this, right?
Okay.
Yeah,
So if you're gonna do a breakpoint, can you walk us through? Let's make it an educational thing. So this is how Drew debugs. You can open up the
Well,
developer
wait,
tools. Wait,
Are you,
what?
is the issue this action not running?
Yeah,
You have to enter a merge key.
I had a merge key originally.
it doesn't require the merge key though, because there are cases where you don't want it to merge. This is actually one of them.
I was pretty sure that it required it, but maybe I'm just wrong.
Even if it requires it, ID would work, and I just put it in there. It didn't work. But what I can do, which I think we have a video on this somewhere that like lays this out. You can copy and paste some because it's gonna be hard to remember. But the way I would go about debugging this is getting this action ID here from the 3-dot menu, and then I can use that by doing this very specific thing here, where I open the inspector, I go to the sources tab, I come to documents scus.builder, then files prod, and then objects. I already have this actually here from before, but you come into this file, you come all the way down to line 2234, which ironically, or not ironically, weirdly changes every time we release. So you just have to find this line with window, and you add a very specific breakpoint like this setup. So like I have this thing in my copy paster that I always just have it ready to paste. But you paste this line and then you paste that action ID into the array there. You can have multiple action IDs at once, but if I do that and keep this orange, keep this enabled, then when I run the page, anytime it gets to that action, it's going to stop and it's going to show me all the inputs, all the outputs, what functions are running. I can step through the actual JavaScript. So this is like the way I debug today, that one day, as we mentioned a few times in the past, we'll like wrap this up into a nice debugger that we can use, like that people can use without knowing what line to go to and what to type. You can just say, break on this action and it'll show you the info, that kind of thing. But this is like the manual way to do it right now. So if I refresh, it paused here because it is running that action, I guess. So stopped on that action. And the first thing I'll do is come down here to input arguments, just to check a few things. So the value of the object, the grid list, that's the ID. That's correct. I'm not triggering a change event. That's correct. That's fine. and it's telling me the value is nothing, which is interesting. So, and I guess I kind of knew that because there's no network request for this data. But actually at this point, I don't know how to find out.
The next thing would be to breakpoint inside, further in, like inside the core, where there are breakpoints that can be run where you actually break when the core tries to go get any data collection information. So we can go there, but before we go there, could you go back to the action real quick? Because I joined late. I just wanted to look at the action one more time.
Yeah, and I think I know what the problem is.
What is it?
I think it's a static file dependency.
Really?
Yeah, I think because it's being brought in the merge, it's not going through that type and finding that there's a dependency to that data collection. I bet if he does a set variable for both of those, it'll work.
So what I'll do then in that case, we'll see if this works, is basically I'm going to set a variable that I don't need. So whenever I do that, I just call it cache usually. I'm not even really caching it exactly, but kind of am. But basically, if you set a variable and you pull in a data collection, then Bildr like does smart things. Like Bildr knows that and it caches it and whatever. So a lot of times if you need data or something weird is happening with the data, like he's saying that Bildr is not recognizing it's coming and putting it into a static file, I can kind of like force Bildr to do that just by setting a variable that forces Bildr to call for that data. So I'll do one for data 1 and one for data 2 and see how that works.
And Dorian, are you knowing that because that's from the cache changes that were made recently? Because
No.
what is that from? Do we need to write a task? I guess.
Whenever
write a task, I guess it's really the
static
question.
files.
Intuition.
We just never caught it because we never just have one page with one merge.
Mhm.
You see?
So yeah,
I
so
see.
what
This is-
happened, it did work then because we have 6 now. So that's what we were originally trying to do. But what happened is Bildr just wasn't recognizing because of the merge. Bildr wasn't recognizing to pull in that data. And so I pulled them both in before the page binding ran and put a wait and good to go.
So Cora, we definitely need a task written up for dev team for catching that, because it's basically like we go into the types that are in the JSON of the actions to see what needs to be executed. And it sounds like the core is going in, hitting merge and not going beyond that. So it's not going to recognize that the data needs to go be taken, right? Is that right, Dorian?
Exactly. But I'll write this one down because I know exactly what the issue is. It's a little, yeah, that would.
And just for an alternative, what I was
Thanks,
actually thinking
Dorian.
was putting in the element set data actions for putting that data into the element. And you said we could stack those as well.
Yeah, well, you can't, if you say set data and it sets 1 and then you say set data again, it'll replace it. But if you say set data again with a merge, it'll merge it. So I don't think it would work exactly, but maybe, I don't know if that's different because when you do set data, there technically is a merge key there too, but I don't think it'll like merge 2 data sets automatically. There's probably ways. And also in a grid list, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dorian and Mark, but I don't think it matters if you use set data or set value for a grid list. I think they're basically the same when you're setting.
Yeah, the
Just
set is the same. The get is different. So that when you set, it's like doing the same exact thing. It's overwriting or it's adding to the data. But when you do a get, the value comes from what's actually being displayed. The data comes from what's actually like completely in the data. And then there's also like search value. If you've done a search, in addition to that, it's like what's been searched on and what the results are. There's several other values you can pull out of there, but on the set, it's the same no matter how you set it.
Yeah, and it's a search result data and rows visible are the other alternatives. Okay.
Cool.
Does anyone have questions on that? I know actually we might have a related question that Fraser asked. So I'll just rephrase it. It's up at the top. So is
It was
there a
Ray.
way to,
I think it was Ray, right? Ray asked the
Oh, no,
Question?
yeah,
Oh,
but
another one.
Fraser's got one up at the top, yeah, that we haven't looked at. All right, so he's asking, is there a way to access the field variables that are active when the grid list is bound so that they can be used in page load flow of the child element of the grid list?
I think that's automatic.
You can assign these variables with the data tab to elements during page binding, but I'd like to make some decisions based on them inside page load flow. Fraser, do you want to come on and maybe give us some more
I guess I'm just wanting
details?
to know if I can get at the variables that are available at the time you bind to the child page in the page load of the child page. So can I get at if it comes in with A, B, C, and D fields or adjacent with those keys, can I get at them inside page flow by somehow referencing them?
I was saying that was automatic, but actually, is it happen in page binding or is it
It's
happen?
automatic.
So
Yeah.
so you can do it.
Yeah,
The
so
only,
the-
oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say the order of operations will probably help if you understand like the exact order of operations that are occurring. So like whether it's a data collection or just manual JSON, right? It's really JSON at the end of the day. So there's this JSON array. Each object inside has a set of properties. The way the grid works is the data gets set and all of the variables get generated from that data as part of what's called form start. So for each row, there's a JavaScript function in the core called form start that basically, as part of that, before the rendering happens, before any rendering happens and before any actions run inside of each row page, all of those properties from the object get set as variables, and then the elements get rendered and the actions run. So all elements and all actions on each row page already should have access to the variables because they'll be local before they're even executed.
Yeah, and I think the only caveat to all this is that the variable name is actually by default anyway, is actually the ID. You know, so like if you wanted like the name field here, you have the variable name is this ID, DRX1G, whatever. But if you are getting data and setting in a variable or doing anything, there is this use field names toggle. If you use field names toggle, then the variable is the actual field name.
Can you show that? Can you actually show the variables of something coming in and on page load or console log and take a look at those variables?
You can also just do it in there, Drew. You should be able to see them, right?
Yeah,
in the
do a
demo
get
page, just
value.
do the inspect on the like you do like we did. You and I did it the other day, Drew, on something like inspect and do the brow form dot. I can't remember what the syntax is. Like
Yeah,
on
I just
that.
want to make sure it's set up right because we're going to be looking in this row page, which is that's not the one I just changed. So I want to go to this set value, and like I'll use field names on one of these, or I can just do it on both these. And then now, what?
Sorry. The other way too is in the row page, you can actually get values from the current record, which then you can select a field name and it'll automatically interpret that into the ID to go pull it from the variable locally. So you can leave it, you can use field names like this, and then it's going to actually set the variables as the names, you know, where the property name is the field name versus the field ID, but that could cause other issues downstream where you're trying to reference things locally and Bildr's assuming there's going to be IDs there for each property of the field, you know, the fields are IDs. And so I would actually leave, like you can do this, but then you need to manually be referencing those names everywhere going downstream from that.
Yeah, I can probably cover all that here and like show
cool.
That's like basically like this use field names. I never toggle it because of that, because Bildr uses IDs, and I actually have gotten the habit of using field names with like spaces in them and stuff because it's like I can now in Bildr. So I usually don't toggle this on, but I can show first if I did just to show it, and then let me just disable this, and then I'll go back and show like that current field record stuff might just be smarter. So this is another weird debug thing, but like if I want to find variables on a specific row, I set them as a global variable, and then it gives me this temp1 that I can type things on. So I don't want to like go too in detail because it's going to be hard to remember, but why does it say undefined?
I think you need the LI.
No, it's the dot. You just missed the dot, Drew. brow form dot underscore vars.
Yep, yep.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is listing all the variables on this page. And you can see I have a variable for name right there with a capital N, exactly like the database name, and a field for description. And they're filled out like this one's name 3, and that's the description. So they're just in there automatically. Like I didn't have to do anything. And like Mark just said, they'll be available on page load. The other way that he was talking about, if I come back in here and remove the use field names. Now well, actually I can show this real quick too. So now they're like ID variables, and they're harder to use, but in the studio, you still have access to the field IDs as an easy way. So just for like posterity, I'm just gonna. So now those same variables here are called the IDs. So that's the distinction. But yeah, so like if I wanted to do, and I'll just do, I gotta go on this page. I'll just set a new variable, I guess, here.
Do console log.
Console log. So you could come from the variable, go get the ID, type in that long ID there. But if you also just want to use the value, and you're not really concerned specifically that it's the variable or whatever, you can do current record field value here. It's like, depending on the context of what you're in Bildr, the current record field value could in theory be different, but like the standard case is you're on a row page inside of a grid. So it knows what the current record is because each grid page is one record. So if I did current record field value, I have to select the data collection first, and then I have to select the field name. But that would essentially be the same thing because you can use current record field value in any of the other actions. So, if you're doing some manipulation on it, instead of coming from a variable, just come from current record field value. In this case, actually, I think it'll only work for half of them because it's this merged thing. Because I looked for
Exactly.
data one name, so it should console log a couple things. Oh, actually, it did all of them. It's really weird. Is that right? It gave me 3 name ones. This is not correct, but it did something weird. I think that the other collection that I didn't select, they all came back as name 1 for some reason, but name 1, 2, or no. Yeah, because those are named
Yeah, it did.
1B. Yeah.
And I think this would be a good use case actually for then translating the value to the name. If you're merging into one grid 2 separate data collections and you did both of them with used field names, then they would all be the same, right? If you made them all the same, but then I would question why you would have 2 data collections with all the exact same field names. Like why not just have one and have a type column inside of it or something? That would make all this stuff consolidated easier.
Yeah, the other method would be to use the alternate pages on the grid.
Yeah. Have
'Cause
one
then-
page for each data collection,
Because
basically.
then you would have a different row page per data collection, but all being served into the same grid.
Yeah, and that's the method actually, because like long-term, whenever you're maintaining a system like this and you have the same data being set into the same grid rows, even if like right now in your project, those 2 rows are identical in the look, it's like highly likely that because they're 2 data collections, long-term, you're going to have different things running on them. So we tend to like just separate them from the beginning,
So for that, just because I have this page open, if I want to do separate alternating rows, and I have this row and then this row, actually just goes 2. If I get the ID of this page right here, and then I come to the grid, and there's this, there's a JSON array in here, but I think really all I need to care about is this page ID. If I just fill that in as my alternate page ID. Is that all I have to do?
And the value.
The path is the
the path and the value. You gotta basically tell it which. Oh, this is used for the other thing. Oh man, Dorian, you and I were just like thinking about this wrong. Sorry, we had this like totally wrong. And this is when you have one collection where your path is the field ID. And depending on the value of that field, you want to display different forms, different pages. That's the rows.
This is
sorry. Yeah, we were having it.
You
You could still use it. You just have to in the columns do it,
Like you could use the filter set _ value as the path.
Yeah, you could.
Yeah. and like,
You would have to
so-
go grab it, but
Yeah, there's a bunch of ways you do. You could actually in a data collection, in the second data collection, have a column 1 that has a value of 1 in it. And that data collection is the only,
Okay.
the data from that collection is the only set of records that'll have that value. So those are the only ones that would flip to that one. So, I mean, the thing is here, what you're doing is you're basically using JSON in really complex ways, right? I mean, that's really all we're doing here. And so it's almost up to you, all the different mechanisms here. Drew, this is for having like a heading versus a text versus an image kind of rows. Is that what you're?
kind of like
This is like, I'm gonna see if this works for a specific situation, but yeah, that could be what it's used for.
Yeah.
But in
Right.
this case, this actually might be what you want to do more, Chief. I don't know, but this is like taking two separate collections, and then I put this field in data one called data one, and I said if data one field equals 1, use this page ID, which is blue. If not, it's going to use the black one. So I merged two data collections into one grid, and then I show a different page for the appropriate data collection. So in this way, like I know row page with row page 1 here is always data 2 actually, and I know row page 2 is data collection 1. So I can actually do like whatever I want there. They can have different fields, they can be different structures, and it'll all work together and display the right page for the right data. So it's kind of an interesting, I mean, like, I think what we said a second ago is true. There's just like so many use cases out of this stuff. These are just the building blocks that make a million complex scenarios, but this is
Yeah,
kind
it's-
of, I've never done this.
It sounds like you could make like 60 hours worth of learning material just on this topic. So can we just do one real other quick thing? Can we try to add in the first page, the first row page that you have with the black text, can you try to add an element in there and select data from the second data set? So essentially data from data set 1 is in there, and then data from data set 2 is in there side by side.
So if you wanted to do that in general, I don't think you can do it with this method, because right now, or wait, could you? Maybe you could.
You just need a relationship between the records in some sort. So like you need some key value that matches this record from database from table 1 to this record from table 2. So without that relationship, you wouldn't be able to do it. But there's an alternative here. So whenever I built like Founder Update, it's basically like, it's almost like Medium or something like that, where you're like adding a heading and then you're adding a this and you're adding a that, and you're adding these different things in there, and they all share values. What I actually did was first I created a higher level thing that is like the parent data record. That's like every row is this, and it has a type. And then inside of there, I actually load whatever I want based on that. And that gives me a whole other layer on top of nesting any type of values I want and creating relationships to this one parent row record. So it adds a level of complexity to the data structure, but it then creates like unlimited downstream possibilities. If you do it this way, where you're just like data 1, data 2, data 3, and you have nothing hierarchy wise higher than that, you have to then have relationships between every single type of data if you want to display all the data together on the same row. You know what I mean? Because you got to pick one that is the initial, and then you got to go, okay, well, here's my relationship of table 1 to table 2, and a relationship of table 1 to table 3, and potentially table 2 to table 3. So they'd all have to have like IDs matching between them. It would get really complicated. So depending on the use case, I would almost always suggest have a parent row data type, collection, and then underneath that have all your other like main types, I guess is how
I think it depends too on what you're trying to do, because if you're relating two tables together to show data, then you do need like an ID that bridges them, and it's what Mark's talking about. But you don't even need a parent row page a lot of the time. You can actually just call different data based on that ID. But the other scenario is like they're not related. Like if I have this row of data 1, but I want to show a drop down in here that's reading from data 2 collection, I might not need that to be related with an ID. Like there is a simpler version.
Totally.
But in both cases, the way to actually do it would be, so if this row page is reading from the database, I can use this data tab and bind it to a field. But if I wanted to put like another element in here, like if I did a grid list to show different set of data, I just can't use this data tab. That's all that means. I would just have to go to the page binding flow and just set the value manually. But if I do this, it should be the same thing. This is what was not working in your project, so I think it's a bug. But this should work where we just say, so like this is a grid list on this page, and we set it from data collection. Like if I want to just list everything in data, or this, it's confusing, but this is data 2. So I'm going to list everything in data 1. If I did something like this, it would list all that data in this grid element, no problem. If I were relating them and something in data 2 had a field ID that referenced data field 1, I would actually do a very similar thing, but I would filter it by, I would have a field in here called data ID 1 field. Like I would filter by a field. So it's a little more complex, but the same concept, which is if something's bound, if you're in a grid and you're bound to a collection, you can use the data tab for that collection, for that initial collection. Everything else you just use actions for. And if it worked correctly, which is why I was saying it's a bug, it didn't work right. But if it worked correctly, the data, when you use the actions to do it, it'll always come in.
You can use the data tab too, Drew. It's just not the field, not the left side tab,
Oh,
the
for
right
a
side
grid
tab
list,
only.
data
For a
field.
grid list in particular, or for a select menu, you could use
Okay, yeah, that makes
the
sense.
right side data tab to do the same thing. But what's the, maybe we need to look at the bug separately, but I'm sure we can figure it, because I do this everywhere, like in every
That's why I
project.
was saying it was a bug. 'Cause we
There's-
looked at it, we were DMing yesterday and looking deep into it, and it's not, I didn't understand. I was like, I don't know, it's definitely set up correctly. I was thinking maybe like, is there a weird character in the data that for that data set breaks it? Like I wasn't sure that's the level we got to. So it's probably either something deeper and specific or just a random bug that happens in this scenario.
Yeah, because the use case basically is like, and I would think it would be more universal or more like more people would be doing it this way. But say you set up your landing page and you've got a profile database just for the user profiles. And then you've got like an e-commerce portion of it where you're selling something, right? So you've got a database for that data, and there's an ID in there from the user, right? Or whatever to link to that specific like
Mhm.
sale or whatever it is. And then you could have an additional database for your team or whatever that has a certain set of data that's not all separate data, but all kind of ties together relationally, of course.
So in that e-commerce collection, you have a column that's like user ID basically, and you're filtering that list based on the currently logged in user, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's that's like every single project I build has that exact scenario. So there's got to be something going on there, something specific there. 'Cause-
I feel like we've seen this before, and it was like you just had to redo the grid, something like you had to like delete the
Well,
grid and redo it.
where we had an issue before, there was a bug where it would not run the second data binding from the second collection. So like you had on this, if it's on the root, if all these things are on the root page, and the binding of the root page is different than the binding of like subsequent child pages. There's some extra steps the core goes through because it's referencing things like in the URL route mapping stuff, right? So there's some extra steps there. And in that scenario, there was a bug. I believe it's resolved, but maybe it's back or something. But there was a bug where if you're in the root page, the first collection that would run would successfully go. The second collection that would run in the binding would not go. But you could correct that. You could get around it by not doing it in the binding in the data tab, like Drew was saying, and just do it in actions, and it would always work that way. So it was like only when you had two collections in data binding and only when it was in the root page. But I'm pretty sure that was resolved. I remember that being an issue.
Yeah, I remember that. I
we
think
fixed it.
Fraser was the one that had reported that.
Yeah.
And I think he got around it by putting
Cache
that
it.
second grid in a component. Because effectively it's a different page.
Then it's in another page and it solves it. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe it's something like that similar kind of bug is what's going on, John. We can look at it. If you can send me a link to the page, just like just DM me a link in Discord, and I'm curious if that bug is back or if it's something similar.
Yeah, because that was the behavior it was doing. And then I even took it and just said, okay, let me just create a whole separate like page and a whole separate card and put the data directly into there just from that one data set. And it didn't render it all. It
Didn't work.
rendered
That's
on the
what got me.
screen.
That's where I was like, something's up with
Mm.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, because it rendered inside of Bildr, but then when you did the preview, it wouldn't render it on the preview.
Yeah, DM me the link. I don't need access to the project probably. Just DM me the links to it and tell me what should be loading and I can find it.
Okay.
Build it, Ray.
Um,
It's all exposed. It's just a matter of time, right? That's really, it's like time and priority.
so Ray did have a question above. What happens should we answer that one? I think it's
Yeah, I was
probably
just
still
reading
related.
that.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. Do
Basically,
you want to
it's,
read it out loud?
Yeah, we were talking about the merging earlier, which is what this is about. And it's like, is it like a union in SQL where, or is it basically the question is it just stacking those records together, like stacking them, or is it actually merging them? And the difference is what I did is I purposely stacked them because I used ID as that diff key. And then I knew the IDs were always unique, but you can actually merge them where it makes them wider. Where if you say the merge key is name, and two different records have the name Bob, it'll merge them together, right? I mean, actually, now that I'm saying that,
If
does
they,
add all
it
the
will,
extra-
it will. If they have the same ID, like in your example there, what would happen in that scenario is Robert would overwrite Bob because it's the second, it's a sequential order thing, right? So in the mapping, whenever you're adding all the different collections and things into the merge, think of the first one as like the base, and then you're basically merging into that one every single time, I believe. Is that right, Dorian? Pretty sure that's the way it goes.
Yeah.
And so in your scenario, you would end up with one record with ID 1 with given name Robert and a new property, a new record value of date of birth with that value in it. So one record with Robert overwriting Bob with a new property name in it.
That's my grandpa and my uncle and my cousin's name, Bob Jones.
Dude, like really, I think actually me too, not even joking.
It's
My
common
mom's
name.
name. That's hilarious. But it's like, same hierarchy.
Awesome. So Ray said, thank you. So do we have any other questions? I was gonna maybe chat about bounties real quick. Looks like we've got like 15 minutes.
There
left.
was the FileMaker question in there
Oh, yes.
from Bizzle.
Bizzle McIzzle, who I believe is showing his video today, but he's got a hat on, so we don't really know if he washed his hair or not.
Yeah, I did actually. But I'm wearing the hat because I don't have very much hair. So I'd like to just keep it on. Yeah, actually, so I've been using FileMaker. I built like this kind of a database GUI kind of thing to keep all of the videos that I have, like 400 videos that I've minted onto Arweave, but I needed to keep them organized in some way, but it's not something I want to stick with. I'd like to be able to kind of move all that database, all the data over to Bildr, and then create some sort of like a system for myself to interact with the smart contract that I have on Polygon. But before that, it would, God dang it. Before that, it would upload to some sort of a server that would keep the information, the data, like the video files, maybe an FTP server or something of my own creation. And then it would then upload them and mint them onto Arweave. If you're familiar with that, it's kind of like IPFS. And then it would take the metadata from the Arweave transaction and move it over to mint the NFT on Polygon. Yeah. I have all this information. I got all this stuff on FileMaker, except all those interactions I just spoke about. And I didn't know if I needed to hand transfer maybe just like the names, the metadata information for each one of the ones that are already created, the descriptions, all the metadata that I have for the NFTs is what's inside the database. And does anybody had any experience moving it from a FileMaker Pro system to a?
You can export it
Bildr?
into like a CSV, right? Like out of FileMaker.
I think so.
Yeah, I think probably the way I would do it, because it's just going to be string data, right? Just text data
Yeah.
in there. And so I would export to CSV, and then I actually did this in Hustle versus there was a Mint that they just went live this week on, and they basically had an allow list outside and they needed to import it in. So I made a quick admin on it where you can use there's an element called file upload. So after you have this CSV, you can use that element, like make a little admin page, hit the button, upload the CSV, and that's going to store it inside of that element. You're going to have CSV data. And then there's an action that you can run that translates the CSV into a JSON. Okay, so the trick is going to be before you upload that CSV, the easiest way to do it, rather than having to like make a UI for a mapping of the column name to the ID of the field in Bildr, because that's what you're trying to do is get that CSV into that. What you want to do is go into the CSV first and just go in like Drew was into the collection and get the field IDs and change the heading on each one, like open up Excel or something or numbers and change the heading and then save that as a CSV. Now you're going to have each row where the columns are actually the IDs of the fields in Bildr for the collection you're going to import into.
So make the collection first.
Yeah, make the collection, add all the fields, and then get all the IDs, update the CSV with that. Then on this little admin page, upload the CSV into that element. You can use an action that converts CSV to JSON. And then you can use one update record action and change the data to get it from that JSON. I could actually maybe we could, you want to just do this? Like I can just do this real quick and show it.
If you want to go through it, I can, I have to get my other computer because I have it on my PC instead of my Mac, which I'm on right now, because it's so darn expensive, this FileMaker system. So I reformat my hard drive just to use this darn thing every 30 days. So, because I don't want to pay for it. I need some time to get the information, but I would love to go through it with you at some point if you have time to. I can, when I get it.
Yeah, I mean, we could do.
You can do a quick example, I think, just because it's the CSV thing people ask about a lot, and it's kind of a cool little trick you're talking about. So I think it might be cool to show if you can do it.
Yeah, it's pretty super easy. Let me make a quick project here.
I'm pretty sure a few users asked about it in Discord not too long ago.
And I think we tried to cover it in the last office hours, but we didn't show anything.
And Dorian and I actually just went over, he's going to help me out making some templates out of these things that we built with some partners recently. And one of them is this admin page that helps you with that and also updating token metadata. So like we made like a loop that goes and updates all the data and all that. There's a lot to that. And if you're minting out of Bildr, depending on the project, we have a metadata server that we've set up for Bildr partner projects. And we want to make that something that everyone can use. And basically we help with the hosting of that because that's one of the complicated parts of doing mints in general. So we want to help with that. Let me show, let's see. So I'm just going to make a page and we'll just call this like admin. So first what I'm going to do is go into the data collections and I'm going to make a new thing and we'll just call this, NFTs or something. And what I'll do is make a couple of fields. So let me get the video out of the way. One sec. Oop, sorry. Clicked on the wrong thing. There we go. All right. Videos out of the way. All right. So first we'll do is like, I'll just do name and then another one for description, something like that. Okay. So now we've got these two fields. Then what I'm going to do is first I would go into my CSV and in the name column, I would copy this and change the name column in my CSV to this. And then in the CSV on the description column, I would change the column name to this. So that way I've got now matching data for the upload. Then in the admin page, I'm going to need a couple of things. You can do a file uploader element. So drop that on and you'll see it goes to like the native file uploader thing for the browser. So whenever this gets clicked in the preview or in the test or production environment, it's going to allow you to upload from your computer. And then what I would do is put a button on here that does a create JSON, and you could actually do all this like on a change event of this and all that, but I would probably do it in steps just so I can like see it happening with it. And if you're building like a proper importer that's going to be used over and over again, you would want to like display it and show the data that's about to be imported and maybe even let you modify it. And then from there, you then create the records. But for our purposes, I'm just going to do it like this. Let's do another button on here that does create records. We won't actually be able to test this all the way out because I don't actually have a JSON file prepped, but we'll be able to see the process here. So I'm going to do a new flow and I'll just call this create JSON. This is on click of that create JSON button. And what I'm going to do is a CSV to JSON. So this action will take a CSV and it's assuming you're going to pull it out of one of these elements. So I'm going to choose that file element. And what it's going to do is create two variables for us. One is going to set just the names of the columns so that we can get to that data if we want it. The other is going to set the data itself into a variable all already in a JSON that's ready to use and save into a Bildr collection. And because we already changed the names of those columns inside the CSV, this is the only thing I'm going to care about here. Then on the create records, what I'm going to do is another new flow. We'll call it create records. And I'm actually going to use the update record. I know it sounds funny, but I'm going to use the update record here. And instead of a data collection, we're going to choose the data collection. And then instead of the data for record update as a JSON object, I'm actually going to change this to just come from that variable called data. And that's literally all we have to do, because what's going to happen is when I upload the file and then click this button creates the JSON called data, and the column names are already there. And then I'm going to use the create records. That's going to take all that information and save all the data will just get placed into a new record inside of that collection. So this would be for a one-time thing. Like if you want to like update records that are already there and those kind of things, it'll get a little more complicated because you need IDs and you need, there's more to it where you're going to have to merge stuff. But if all you're doing is like a one-time pull from here, set into there, this process would do it. And that's literally all you'd have to do there. We should probably make this like a block that you can just drop into an admin page, because it's something that's pretty common for a single upload process.
Hey, Mark, Ray's got a question.
Sure.
He's asking if he has to press the create JSON button, or can the flow come from the create file getting assigned?
Yeah, so you could do an on change here and just go create JSON on change. And then what'll happen is when you upload the file, it's going to run that event and just create the JSON. And then you'll have that variable already there called data. And if I was doing this as like an actual UI, I would do exactly what you're talking about here, but I would actually go a step further and just immediately take that JSON and set it into a grid of rows to show all the data. And maybe even like let you type in other information or modify information there, or do whatever you need to do with it. And then the create records is at the end of that process. That's also the UI I would do for like, if I wanted to merge things together, because you would need to pick like, what's the merge key and what are all the steps, Totally agree. You remember that the old UI book? And he said down with buttons. If anybody's watching the video and doesn't know what the heck I said, I agree with. You remember that there was that old book. What is basically one click is better than two, no clicks is better than one. I can't remember what the UI book. It was like one of the first UI books that ever came out. It was like early 90s kind of thing. It was like for web design, basically.
I tried to do that in like the early, or probably like the mid 2000s. I thought I was going to usher in a new trend of no-click websites. And I made the most awesome thing where when you have buttons on a site, and as you move your mouse towards it, the button starts coming to you. So the way that you would access it is the buttons will start moving. If you didn't want to click that button, you move away. But as soon as you go hover over the button, it's like a click and it goes. and I made the site for a client. Like I was so proud of it. It was like the craziest functionality ever. It was all no click. And I told the client I was going to do it. They were kind of excited about it, but I showed it to them and they're like, like we can't use this. What is, like, they hated it so much.
That's awesome.
That'd be really cool if you were able to do something like that with your eyes. You know, you could, if your
That's
camera,
where
you're
my
on
mind was going too. I was
VR.
like, it has more implications. Like eye tracking, like perfect. But
Yeah,
I abandoned
absolutely.
it
And
20 years ago at this point.
all the things you would accidentally do in that system, like
Oh,
just
man.
looking around. Dang it. You get distracted by the dog and you accidentally like send an email to somebody.
Well, that would be that would put a whole new definition of your dog ate your homework.
There you go.
Yes,
Oh man.
Thank you for that, by the way.
guys.
That was very clear.
No worries.